You'll know the dough has risen when it's almost doubled in size like that. However, we're going to let it rise a little bit more when we go ahead and whip up the toppings for this pizza. In order to do that, you need a big saucepan like this. At least this kind of pizza. With regular pizza, you can just go ahead and do it the normal way, regular ground beef and such. But we are going to actually be making a sort of Mexican-flavored, cheesy version of ground beef for tacos that will be actually really great on top of pizza. Be sure you set your oven on high before you start cooking this. You're going to want to get your pot all nice and heated up, and a pan technically, but the pot works too, I guess. Make sure it's all nice and hot before you do it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a can of Campbell's cheddar cheese. I don't know if it's soup or if it's a base. And you're going to go ahead and you're going to brown the ground beef in it. So, get your thawed ground beef, and I put mine in my fridge since it was done well before the dough had finished rising. Let's go ahead and take that, dump it right on in. Now, the advantage to cooking ground beef in the microwave, or at least thawing it, is that it won't have as much fat, because all the fat will seep out from the microwave cooking. So just as per normal, go ahead and chop the ground beef up, cook it into small chunks like you normally do for ground beef for tacos. And this, of course, will take a little while. And if you're not so good at cooking ground beef, you might want to look up some tips online. And pretty much all you really got to do is just keep the stuff moving, make sure you don't burn it, cut it into little chunks, and when it's all nice and brown, that's when it's done. And if it smells like it's starting to burn a little bit, just add a little bit of olive oil into the pan. And make sure you turn the heat down to about medium once you have the pan hot and everything in. While the meat's cooking, go ahead and take a little bit of chili powder and just kind of sprinkle it over the meat. Make sure you get a nice, semi-even coat and get a decent amount on top. While that's also going down, you're going to go ahead and take some seasoning salt and sprinkle that on as well. This will bring out flavors in the meat that'll go well with the rest of the spices done up in the pizza. You're going to want to stir the spices in, sort of. Go ahead and get the meat split, chop, and just basically cook the meat as you would normally. Just make sure you keep flipping it. You want to get all the sides even, and you want nice, small chunks like you have in the taco. You don't want big pieces. And also, the smaller you make it, the faster it'll cook. The faster it'll cook, well, the faster you have your pizza. And that's the end goal of this. Anyway, so you may want to open up a couple windows if you don't like strong smells, because this smells strongly, but it does have a good smell. It's not a bad smell at all. But the spices you just put in do make the meat have this particular odor that, if you cook with a house of other people, they might find semi-offensive to the nose. And that's just my own experience. You might have other people that you live with that won't. And you're going to want to make sure there's absolutely no red left in the meat by the time you're done cooking it. Now it's starting to look like it's done. You can see that there's almost no pink left in the meat, or maybe you can't, but looking down the pan, I see there's pretty much no pink left even when I flip this stuff over, and it's looking pretty much golden brown all over. So what we do at this point, take our can of cheddar cheese soup, go ahead and pop it open. You may need a spoon to get this out. And you will, of course, have to add a little bit of water. Not as much, because there's juices from the meat that'll help the soup. So add about a quarter can. Then stir this all up again with your spatula. And you might want to reduce the heat a little bit so you don't burn the meat. But not too low. You want to make sure everything still boils. And yeah, the heat will go away because it has to heat up all the water now. But make no mistake, the pan is still very hot. Yeah, this does look pretty gross, but it'll be better when you're done. Some people like to mix the soup separately and just pour that in completely, but I personally don't like washing a lot of dishes, so I just go ahead and I mix up everything in the pot as I'm cooking it. And personally, I believe that mixes up the flavors of the food a little bit better. So it's not like you take a bite of the finished pizza, and it's not like, oh, I can taste the ground beef, and I can taste the bread part, and I can taste the salsa part. No. This is like, it's like you bite into the pizza, and it's all just one fantastic dish. And as you can see here, the cheesy sauce is kind of melting in onto the end of the beef here. It's all heating up, and you want to just keep stirring that up until it starts to boil. And at that point, I believe like it says on the can, you just let it reduce a little bit. What that means is you're going to let this simmer until some of the water evaporates and it becomes mostly ground beef again. Because what you have right now is basically a stew. By itself, this would be good, but this stuff is going on top of our pizza. Now you can see there it's kind of getting molten and bubbling. Go ahead and give it a little bit of stir so it doesn't burn. At this point, we let it boil for a little bit. Keep on stirring it. So if you let this stuff burn, it's going to taste horrible. So it's not as bad as melting down sugar to make candy, but it's close. You don't want burnt cheese in your oven or in your pan or pretty much anywhere for that matter. And that smells horrible. And it says on the can that we got to let this reduce for a little bit. So turn your heat down to low. Give it a good stir once more. Make sure nothing's sticking anywhere. And put a lid on top of it and let it sit for about 5 minutes. If at any time while you're letting it simmer it smells like it's burning, immediately come and stir it and take it off the heat. Once the meat stops simmering, go ahead and take it off the heat. Take off the lid. You're going to want this whole thing's to be hot. So you just set it on a hot plate or hot pad, or what I do is just stick on my metal sink. Now, of course, you don't want all that cheesy goop on your pizza. You're going to put cheese on it already. So what you do is you go ahead and you find a little scoop. This measuring cup will do just fine. You take a bowl. You go ahead and skim through it. Do your best to scoop out just the meat from this. Now this step does take a little while, but it's completely worth it because adding the cheesy sauce onto the meat for the pizza, it really does make all the difference in the world. Now this excess cheesy sauce is really good for chip dip. So what you can do is you just pour it right into a Tupperware bowl and save it, which is what I'm going to do. And you'll take your meat, and what you're going to do is you are going to take this and you're just going to set it right aside. And I'm sorry about that cut, but I had to go get a Tupperware. And like I said, you can just store the rest of the stuff for later. You know, you're going to have chips for a party along with the pizza or something. You have a nice dip. You know? I wouldn't recommend eating it like a soup anymore because it's way too thick to be a soup. And this stuff's also a pain to clean, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to immediately rinse out your pan. Don't let it sit in the sink or anything with this cheesy stuff on it because it'll never leave. You know? But now let's come to the next part of making good pizza, the sauce. And here's a typical package of marinara sauce. You can use regular pizza sauce, but I like using marinara because I don't have to add basil to it myself. So what you do is you go ahead and you pop open your can of incredibly hard to open sauce. Take an ordinary bowl and just pour that sauce in until you have a decent amount for a pizza. Of course that varies to taste. Some people like a lot of sauce, some people don't like a lot of sauce. And because your mileage will vary on the sauce, the powders you add to it, which is garlic powder starting, it will take a little bit of adjusting and fine-tuning, but I recommend about a tablespoon of garlic powder for every 3 ounces of sauce. 1 tablespoon of ground paprika, red peppers to taste, and I like a lot because I like my pizza to be hot, and then a little chipotle chili pepper. You just kind of want to dust this stuff. It is powerful. I put on, maybe 2 teaspoons of this stuff. And you just take a spoon, stir this all up until it's a nice thick paste. And of course you can add more sauce to the pizza later without having to mix some spices into it if it looks like the sauce is too thin. Don't worry, it will not affect the flavor too much at all. And now we come back to the dough again. And you'll notice it's a lot bigger than it was. And what you want to do is, once again, dig out your flour. Only this time, you'll be working on your pizza pan. If you don't have a pizza pan, a baking sheet for cookies works just fine. If you don't have a baking sheet for cookies, you're going to need one for this, or a pizza pan. Just go ahead and lay out your flour, and don't use too much because this will end up on the bottom of the pizza, and too much flour makes it taste bad. This will give the pizza a nice sort of base coat. You just want to move that around and get it even. Plop your dough on top of that. Then, sort of knead it, flip it some more, and you're going to get this all nice, elasticy. And some people do add a little bit extra powder onto their pan once they're done kneading it, but I don't, because I don't really like all the floury taste on the bottom of my crust, but some people do, so if that's what you want, go ahead and add some more. Eventually, you're going to start doing this, just kind of pulling the dough on its sides and letting its own weight drop and fill it out. And you do that till it's pretty much round. At this point, it's getting a little bit sticky again, so go ahead and sprinkle on a little more flour, but not too much. And then it's time to, with your hands, sit down and knead this dough, pushing and pulling it until it fills up the pan. Now, you probably won't get your pizza square. You might, if you're really lucky and good at this, but it's kind of a pain to get a round pizza. So what you do, you have your pizza, of course, and you can, shape it with your fingers, make it look all nice and pretty. Then, take your pizza sauce, and just like a normal pizza, prepare your toppings. And once your sauce is in place, you, of course, go ahead and grab whatever cheese you're going to use. Now, I'm using just normal cheddar cheese. You, of course, probably will be using white pizza cheese, but this is a Mexican themed pizza, don't forget. So, we're going to top it with cheddar. Some people put a little extra cheese on top once they put on the meat, but this cheesy sauce stuff, you don't have to with it. It's going to provide enough cheesy flavor with just the baseline of cheese for the pizza. And just once again, take a spoon and spoon the meat onto the pizza. And you'll probably have extra meat, but once again, that's because this recipe is for making more meat, for 3 pizzas, not just 1. So, once your pizza is all nice and looking alright, just go ahead and take it. The oven, go ahead and slide it in there. Set your timer for 30 minutes. Now, about halfway through the pizza being cooked, you're going to want to go ahead and open up the oven, pull out the tray, and you're going to have to do something kind of specific here. What you're going to do is take a bottle of olive oil,